My girlfriend's mother looked across the dinner table and said, "My daughter could have done a lot better than you." The room went quiet. I looked at my girlfriend, waiting for her to say something. She just laughed and took another bite of her food. So I nodded and said, "Maybe you're right." 3 months later, both of them were calling me nonstop, asking why I disappeared from their lives. But by then, I was already gone. I met Emily when I was 28. She was funny, easy to talk to, and seemed genuinely different from most people I'd dated before. At the time, I owned a small logistics company with 2 delivery contracts and 6 employees. I wasn't rich. I wasn't flashy, but I was doing well. Emily worked in marketing and lived in an apartment downtown. Within a year, we were talking about moving in together. A year after that, we did. Things felt stable, at least in the beginning. The first red flag showed up when I met her mother, Diane. Diane had a talent for insulting people while pretending she was helping them. The first thing she asked me was what I did for work. I explained my business. She smiled. "That's nice." Then she asked, "When are you planning to get a real career?" Everyone laughed, including Emily. I laughed too, mostly because I didn't want to make things awkward. After dinner, Emily told me I was being sensitive. That's just how Mom jokes. So I let it go. A few weeks later, Diane visited our apartment. She walked through every room like she was inspecting a hotel. She commented on the furniture, the kitchen, the neighborhood. Then she stopped in the living room. Emily always dreamed of a bigger place. I looked around. We lived in a nice apartment. Nothing luxurious, but comfortable. Emily didn't disagree. She just shrugged. I remember feeling annoyed. But again, I let it go. Because relationships require patience. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself. The second red flag came from Emily herself. Whenever her mother criticized me, Emily defended her. Never me. At first, I thought she was trying to keep the peace. Then I realized she genuinely agreed with a lot of what Diane said. One night, I asked her directly, "Do you think your mom respects me?" Emily laughed. "She respects successful people." That answer stuck with me, because it wasn't really an answer. A few months later, my company landed a major contract. It doubled our revenue. I was excited. I took Emily out to celebrate. Halfway through dinner, she said, "Mom thinks you're lucky." I smiled. Lucky? Yeah, she doesn't think what you do requires much skill. I remember staring at her, not because of what Diane thought, but because Emily seemed perfectly comfortable repeating it. Again, I ignored it. I shouldn't have. The pattern continued. Family dinners became exhausting. Diane constantly compared me to other men. Doctors, lawyers, corporate executives, people I'd never met. Emily never pushed back. Not once. If anything, she helped. One evening, Diane spent 20 minutes praising the boyfriend of one of Emily's cousins. Apparently, he had just bought a luxury condo. When she finished, she looked at me. "What about you?" I smiled. "What about me?" She shrugged. "Nothing, just curious." Everyone understood what she meant, especially me. The strange part was that Emily acted completely normal afterward. Like none of it mattered. Like I was supposed to absorb these comments forever. Then came the first serious problem. Emily started making financial decisions without discussing them. Not huge ones. At least not initially. Expensive vacations. Designer purchases. Large credit card balances. Whenever I questioned it, she'd say, "It's my money." Technically, she was right. But we lived together. We were planning a future. Financial decisions affected both of us. Every conversation ended the same way. I was accused of being controlling. Eventually, I stopped bringing it up. That only made things worse. Because once people learn you'll tolerate something, they usually increase it. The breaking point started during a family barbecue. Diane spent most of the afternoon talking about another guy Emily should have dated. I wish I were exaggerating. She was openly discussing him while I sat 10 feet away. At one point, she actually said, "He became a partner at his firm." Then she looked directly at Emily. "You always had terrible timing." People laughed. I waited. I expected Emily to shut it down. She didn't. Instead, she smiled. That hurt more than the comment itself. On the drive home, I finally brought it up. "Why didn't you say anything?" Emily rolled her eyes. "You're overreacting. Your mother was comparing me to another guy." "So what?" I looked at her. "So what?" She sighed dramatically. "You always make everything about you." That was the first moment I seriously questioned the future. Not because of Diane. Because of Emily. A week later, the major boundary violation happened. I didn't argue after she said it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand an explanation. I just nodded. "Okay." Emily seemed surprised by how quickly I dropped it. Almost disappointed. Like she had prepared for a fight and didn't get one. The next morning, she left for her trip. No details. No destination. No explanation. Just a quick goodbye before walking out the door. I spent the weekend working. At first, I told myself it wasn't a big deal. People take trips with friends. People need space. But every time I tried to justify it, I kept coming back to the same question. If we were building a future together, why was basic transparency suddenly a problem? When Emily came back on Sunday night, she acted like nothing had happened. She unpacked her bags, turned on the television, started talking about a show she'd been watching. Eventually, I asked, "Did you have fun?" "Yep." "Where'd you go?" She looked at me. The same look as before. Annoyance. Disrespect. "Why are you still asking?" I stared at her. "I'm your boyfriend." She laughed. And that conversation ended exactly where every difficult conversation ended, with me somehow becoming the problem. By the end of the night, she was accusing me of being insecure. The actual issue never got discussed. That became a pattern. Every concern I raised got redirected. Every question became evidence of some flaw in me. If I mentioned respect, I was needy. If I mentioned communication, I was controlling. If I mentioned boundaries, I was insecure. At first, I genuinely questioned myself. Maybe I was overthinking things. Maybe Diane's comments bothered me more than they should. Maybe Emily was right. Then something happened that made everything much harder to ignore. A few weeks later, Diane invited us to dinner. About halfway through the meal, she started talking about money. Again, that wasn't unusual. Money was her favorite topic. Specifically, other people's money. She started asking questions about my business. Revenue, clients, growth plans. The conversation felt less like dinner and more like an interview. Then she asked, "How much did your company make last year?" I smiled. "I don't really discuss that." Diane looked offended. "Oh." Emily immediately jumped in. "It's not that much." The table went quiet. I looked at her. She shrugged. "What?" That one word hit harder than the insult itself. Because she wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't apologetic. She genuinely thought what she'd said was normal. Later that night, I asked why she felt comfortable discussing my finances with her family. Her response came instantly. "You care too much about what people think." Again, the issue wasn't addressed. The conversation somehow became my fault. I started noticing how often that happened. Every disagreement followed the same formula. Step 1, she did something disrespectful. Step 2, I brought it up calmly. Step 3, she attacked my reaction. Never the behavior, always the reaction. Once I saw the pattern, I couldn't unsee it. A month later, my company was offered a regional expansion opportunity. It was a huge step, something I'd spent years working toward. The expansion would require travel and longer hours initially, but it would significantly increase revenue. I was excited. I wanted to share that excitement with Emily. Instead, she barely looked up from her phone. That's nice. I waited. Nothing else came. No questions. No interest. No congratulations. Just that's nice. The next day I learned she'd spent nearly an hour telling her mother about a promotion one of her coworkers received. That hurt more than I expected. Not because she wasn't excited, because she was capable of being excited. Just apparently not for me. The emotional exhaustion started building after that. Not from one argument, not from one insult, from the constant feeling that I was carrying the relationship alone. Every difficult conversation required effort from me. Every compromise came from me. Every apology came from me. And somehow, every problem was also blamed on me. One evening, I sat in my office after work and started mentally reviewing the last year. I wasn't looking for reasons to leave. I was looking for reasons to stay. That realization bothered me, because healthy relationships don't require you to build a legal defense for your partner. The answer should be obvious. Mine wasn't. Around that time, another incident happened. Emily's cousin got engaged. The entire family gathered for a celebration dinner. At one point, Diane stood up and gave a toast. Most of it was normal. Then she started talking about finding the right partner. She praised ambition, success, status, achievement. Eventually, she looked directly at me. Again, I always tell Emily she deserves someone who challenges her. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even they knew what she was doing. Then Diane smiled. But everyone makes their own choices. I waited. I looked at Emily. She looked away. That was the moment something changed inside me. Not anger, not resentment, clarity. Because after years of excuses, I finally accepted a simple truth. Emily wasn't allowing this behavior. She was choosing it. There was a difference. Allowing something suggests weakness. Choosing it suggests agreement. That realization stayed with me for weeks. I stopped defending myself. Stopped trying to win Diane over. Stopped trying to explain why her comments were inappropriate. Nothing changed. Because the real problem had never been Diane. The real problem lived with me. Then came the conversation that ended everything. It happened on a Thursday night. No yelling. No dramatic confrontation. Just two people sitting in a living room. I told Emily we needed to talk. She immediately looked annoyed. What now? I took a breath. After that conversation, something strange happened. For the first time in years, I felt calm. Not happy. Not relieved. Just calm. The relationship wasn't officially over yet. We still lived together. We still saw each other every day. But mentally, something had shifted. I stopped trying to convince Emily to respect me. I stopped explaining myself. Stopped defending my decisions. Stopped seeking approval from her or her mother. And almost immediately, Emily noticed. The first few days, she acted like nothing had happened. Like she expected me to apologize. Like she expected our usual cycle to continue. It didn't. When she came home from work, I was polite. When she spoke to me, I answered. But I no longer chased conversations. I no longer tried to fix tension. I no longer carried the emotional weight of the relationship. A week later, she finally asked, "Are you mad at me?" "No." "Then why are you acting weird?" I shrugged. "I'm not." That answer seemed to bother her more than any argument ever had. Because arguments meant engagement. Silence meant detachment. And detachment was something she wasn't used to. A few days later, Karma Wave 1 arrived. The expansion opportunity I'd been working on for months became official. The company offered me a position overseeing operations in another city. It wasn't some fantasy promotion. It wasn't millionaire money. But it was a major step forward. A fresh start. A new chapter. And for the first time, I made a decision without consulting Emily. Because after her ultimatum, there was nothing left to discuss. I accepted the offer. The following weekend, I told her, "I'm moving." She looked up from her phone. "What do you mean?" I accepted the expansion position. The color drained from her face. "Wait, you're serious?" "Yes." "You're leaving?" "Yes." For several seconds, she just stared at me. I could practically see her trying to process it. Because for years, every disagreement had ended with me staying. Me adjusting. Me compromising. Now I was simply leaving. Not to punish her. Not to teach her a lesson. Just because it was time. The next morning, her phone calls started. Not Emily's. Diane's. I let the first few go to voicemail. Eventually, she left a message. "A real man doesn't walk away from commitment." I actually laughed when I heard it. The woman who had spent years telling her daughter she deserved someone better was suddenly upset that I was leaving. That was my first clue that the story they had been telling themselves was beginning to crack. 2 weeks later, I moved. No screaming. No dramatic breakup. No revenge. I packed my things, shook hands with the landlord, and left. The silence afterward felt incredible. Not because I hated Emily, because I no longer felt responsible for managing everyone else's opinions. For the first time in years, my home felt peaceful. Then Karma Wave 2 arrived. And it came from people I never expected. Emily's cousin called me. The same cousin whose engagement party Diane had used to take shots at me. We talked for nearly an hour. Near the end of the conversation, he said something surprising. "You know, most of us noticed what was happening, right?" I paused. "What do you mean?" "The comments, the comparisons, the disrespect." That conversation led to several others. Apparently, I wasn't the only person who had grown tired of Diane's behavior. Many family members tolerated it because arguing with her was exhausting. Some had even confronted her before. Nothing changed. The difference was that I had finally removed myself from the situation. And once I did, people started viewing things differently. A few relatives reached out privately. Not to gossip. Not to take sides. Just to tell me they understood. That support mattered more than I expected. Because for years, I had quietly wondered whether I was imagining everything. I wasn't. Then came the proof that changed everything for Emily. A mutual friend visited me one afternoon. During our conversation, he mentioned something interesting. A few weeks after I moved, Diane had started criticizing Emily's new boyfriend prospects. The same way she criticized me. The same comments. The same impossible standards. The same constant dissatisfaction. Nothing was ever enough. That's when Emily finally saw something I had understood years earlier. The target had never been me. The target was whoever happened to be standing closest. For the first time, she couldn't blame my reaction. She couldn't call me insecure. Because the pattern continued after I left. The problem stayed exactly where it had always been. That realization hit her hard. A month later, Emily called. I almost didn't answer. Eventually, I did. The conversation was quiet, awkward, different. She asked how the new position was going. I told her it was good. Then there was a long pause. Finally, she said, "I think I owe you an apology." I didn't respond immediately. Not because I wanted revenge, because I genuinely didn't know what to say. She continued, "I should have defended you." Another pause, and I should have listened. For a moment, I heard something I'd never heard before. Accountability. Real accountability. No excuses. No blame shifting. No mention of my flaws. Just responsibility. Then she said something that stayed with me. "I didn't think you'd actually leave." There it was. The truth. Not the arguments. Not the insults. Not the ultimatums. The assumption. She believed I would tolerate anything because I always had. I thanked her for the apology. We spoke for a few more minutes. Then the call ended. That was the last meaningful conversation we ever had. Karma Wave 3 wasn't financial. It wasn't social. It was emotional. Emily eventually had to live with the realization that respect isn't automatic. And neither is loyalty. When someone repeatedly tells you that your feelings don't matter, eventually you stop sharing them. When someone repeatedly treats your presence as guaranteed, eventually they discover it isn't. The hardest consequence wasn't losing me. It was understanding why she lost me. As for me, life became quieter. The new role challenged me. The business continued growing. I met new people, built new routines, focused on friendships I had neglected. Most importantly, I stopped measuring my value through other people's approval. That lesson changed everything. Looking back now, I don't hate Diane. And I don't hate Emily. Holding on to that would only keep me attached to a chapter that already ended. The relationship didn't fail because of one dinner comment. It didn't fail because of one argument. And it didn't fail because of one ultimatum. It ended because of hundreds of small moments where respect should have existed but didn't. The sentence that finally changed my life wasn't when a mother called me a failure. It was when I realized I had spent years trying to earn respect from people who had no intention of giving it. Once I stopped chasing it, everything became clear.